I am the life, Part 3. The mission of Moses the prophet. The teaching of the Bible begins with two important facts about man. I again draw attention to these facts because of their great importance in the unfolding of the truth. It is only by understanding of truth that the facts are: 1. That man is made in the image and likeness of God, reproducing in individuality the same universal mind consciousness, which is the origin of all things, and thus reproducing also its creative process of thought. 2. Because man is ignorant of this truth, he brings upon himself all sorts of trouble and limitation. The Bible leads us step by step out of this ignorance, and into this knowledge also step by step. This gradual unfoldment is a process of growth, first in the individual, then in the race. And this growth is founded upon the law inherent in man himself, which always acts uniformly, making no exception in favor of anyone. It does this positively as well as negatively. As a man soweth, so does he reap. In James 5:8 we read, "Whoever of you is defective in wisdom, let him ask God who gives to all men without question or reproach, and the gift will be his. Only let him ask in faith, with never a doubt, for the doubtful man is like the surge of the sea, whirled and swayed by the wind. The man need not imagine he will get anything from the Lord, double-minded creature that he is, wavering at every turn." Now our ignorance of any law will not exempt us from its operation, no matter whether we ignorantly obey the law or ignorantly disobey it. The law of our being acts just as positively as it does negatively, according to man's thinking and acting, so that in man's own creation he reaps what he sows. This law does not take into consideration what kind of individual is acting upon it. It does not make any exception, whether a person be a saint or a sinner. These are all but illusions in the world of shadow. The law brings about just what the man himself creates, so there is no difference in this respect, whether he be a saint or a sinner, a Jew or a Gentile, or a king or a tramp. God gives because the man asks, and knows the law how to receive. When one knows this law, one proceeds along the path humble, yet positive, kindly, yet just and true to oneself. To thine own self be true, and it must follow, as the might the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. The plain meaning is, be true to yourself, and you will be true to others. The law is the law, and it does not alter to suit the craving of any individual. The law is immovable, unchangeable. You become the law when you know the law and work with the law. The Trinity of the law of God is revealed throughout creation. In the first place, the mighty intelligence which created the universe reveals the inherent, immovable, unchangeable aspect of the law, which cannot be affected in any way either by angel or man. The second aspect of the law is revealed, that this intelligence, which created the universe and all that is in it, will respond to man's own creative thought in creating for him, in his own world of action, good or evil, according to what he creates. As a man sows, so shall he reap. The third aspect of the law is through grace, whereby a man realizes his true sonship and becomes one with infinite life and responds to the first law of being. All he has been creating is wiped away, and he stands as he was, born in the image and likeness of God. What the great spiritual leaders of the race always worked for was to impart the understanding of the law to the people. This work not only applied to Moses and all the other prophets, but it also continues today and is still in its infancy. Generation after generation, the law is still further revealed as the progress of humanity rolls on. The method of training was such in the first place as to lead mankind into the ignorant obedience of the law, for it would have been impossible for the unenlightened mind of early man to grasp the real relation of things. Such explanation of the truth would be worse than useless. Hence came the whole system of the Mosaic law. There are also many today unable to comprehend the law. The great mass of humanity is still ignorant of it. The revealing of the truth to mankind is still in its infancy, for few understand this inherent mighty law within mankind. During the last few generations, there has been a partial clearing of the mental strata of the mind, but it has become fogged again by war and destruction. Still, even this will cause man to evolve, because he will crave for something to lead him out of the conditions into which he has drifted, through his misunderstanding of the divine law, for man brings about his own hell. There will always be someone ready to answer the cry when it goes up. God has not forgotten humanity. In fact, humanity is his own life and substance. Those who let others do their thinking for them violate the law of their own being. Many of the leaders, including those of the church, are devoid of the truth, for their hearts are so full of creed, dogma, and ceremony that there is no room for love and understanding. and their minds are so full of images, idolatry, and concepts that there is no room for wisdom and truth. Moses came as the early forerunner to bring into operation the foundation of the people of God. From the desert, he gathered together tribes, all the people that he could rely upon as a foundation to carry the truth down the ages, so that it would never in any circumstance be lost. These tribes, which have existed in the desert for many, many years, were known as the shepherd people. They had the power of the infinite intelligence within them. They were remnants of the last great period of this earth, and had come down from the ancients, still retaining some of the ancient wisdom that classed them as the people of God. The shepherd people had the understanding of the Spirit in its relation to man, and had direct contact with the great mighty intelligence, which revealed through them the truth of humanity. In Egypt, they built the Great Pyramid, which stands today as one of the most outstanding feats in human history. They built the mighty pyramid to scale with exact measurements, showing what man would have to pass through during the next 5,000 years from that time. The structure of the pyramid represents a mathematically exact interpretation of humanity's histories up to the present time. The shepherd people built it, using mighty spiritual power, and left the data of humanity for all time. Scientists have vainly tried to conjure up some idea of how the pyramid was built, and even today they have no knowledge of how the shepherd people obtained their great wisdom or performed this great feat. The Egyptians did not like this secret power which the shepherd people possessed, but in fact could not withstand it. After completing their task, they disappeared into the desert once more. The shepherd people knew the prophets, and the prophets knew the shepherd people. In fact, they were one and the same. King David belonged to the shepherd people. He was the shepherd king, and Jesus the direct descendant of King David. So these were the people from whom Moses drew, for the sacred task of carrying the truth of humanity through the ages. Moses had to begin this great task, and Jesus came to fulfill it and to complete it. We read in Exodus that Moses said, "O my brethren, shall the Lord raise up a prophet like unto me?" And when Jesus came, he said, "I have not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill the law." He was referring to the Mosaic law, the law of the prophets. In Mark 22, 28-31, when asked which was the chief of all the commandments, Jesus said, "The chief one is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and you must love the Lord your God with your whole heart, with your whole soul, with your whole mind, and with your whole strength. The second is this, you must love your neighbors as yourself. There is none other commandments greater than these." The Master's knowledge of the truth was so great that he went to the very heart of it, removing all outside adulterations, and revealed the simple law of life. Fulfill this law of love, and all others are fulfilled with it. What an extraordinarily clear mental attitude towards life, stepping it down to the simplest terms of one thing, love. Because it fills men and women with a desire to do everything possible for their brother's happiness, thus obtaining it for themselves. So the Lord is one Lord. This is the all-pervading truth throughout the whole Bible. Therefore, the divine unity is the foundation of which everything else rests. So there can be nothing else but spirit. It is because we cannot see the law clearly that we see evil, and thus seeing evil is the cause of evil, not only in ourselves, but also that which becomes externalized by the law inherent in our being. Whatever name we give to the first cause, it is always the one, self-existing and self-transforming power, of which everything is some mode of manifestation, simply because there is no other source from which anything could come. The ultimate conclusion we must come to is the recognition of the unity of God. The great truth on which the mission of Moses was founded was the oneness of everything. The oneness of life is revealed everywhere in the Bible. "I am the Father of all," the Eternal speaks to his children. "My children," the Master said, "my flock." When the Jews took up stones to stone the Master, he asked, "What good deed do you stone me for?" The ignorant Jews replied, "We stone you because you call yourself the Son of God." And Jesus replied, "Does it not say in your scriptures that ye are the sons of God? I and the Father are one," reveals the clearness of his understanding. He was revealing the great mighty truth of the individualized infinite spirit in man. But if the scribes and the Pharisees had accepted the truth of the Christ, then they could not hold the people in bondage. If the real freedom of the Christ were given to man, bondage could be no longer possible. Even today, man is not free because he does not know the truth. He is still kept in the dark regarding his true state. The blind lead the blind, and they all fall into the ditch. The Master's Course clearly states how man himself produces conditions of evil. The consciousness of man directs, and the intelligence outpictures in movable, pliable substance, responding to the direction of the Son of God. When man is aware of this fact, he consciously acts upon this substance for his own good, and for the good of his fellow men. But when he is ignorant of the law, he creates discord, both within and outside of himself. One can readily see when the truth is thoroughly understood, no negative or vacillating thought is then allowed to remain in the mind. Therefore, man then uses the instrument of faith and awareness of his own divinity and proves himself to be the Son of God. Man is the microcosm, the manifestation of the infinite macrocosm. The child, when he grows up, becomes the father of the man. The Son of Man, when he is raised up, becomes the Son of God. As Moses raised up the serpent in the wilderness, so much the Son of Man be raised up. There is only one self-existent, self-transforming power in which everything, no matter what mode of manifestation, is its own creation. Because there is no other source from which it could come, therefore the ultimate conclusion must be the recognition of the unity of God as one being, not separate being. To reveal this great truth of the one and all was the mission of Moses. I am the Lord thy God. I am the God of your forefathers. The mission of Moses starts with the phenomena of the burning bush. Exodus 3. The angel of the Eternal appeared to him in a flame of fire, rising out of a thorn bush. When he looked, there was a thorn bush ablaze with fire, yet not consumed. God called to him out of the thorn bush, saying, Moses, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. The bush represents the form which the fire or life permeates, the form through which the life is expressing itself, and from within the bush, God speaks. The bush represents the man, the fire, the life intelligence in action, the consciousness, the voice, I am speaking. But note what is said. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, showing the one Lord in all. For the esoteric meaning of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is as follows. Abraham, the spirit in manifestation, known as the Father. Isaac, the soul manifestation of the breath, means breath, life in action. Jacob, the body. The names given to the ancient prophets are symbolic and reveal the hidden truth, the Trinity in man, spirit, soul, and body, the three in one. Yet note that Jesus said, I am before Abraham. So we see the bush represents the man, the fire, the life intelligence in action, and the voice, the I am, the central spiritual power in God and in man. Note the significance of the spoken word. It stands out above all other things. It was also this that Moses had to see clearly. The sacred power of the spoken word has been hidden from the masses. Even Moses did not reveal it to his people, though he used it himself. And here we see the sacred word of God as the I am, and also see it as the source of the spoken word. The I am says I am, and it alone can say I am. Therefore, I am that I am. God said to Moses, I am shall be my name for all time. In every cell of the body, life exists. Electricity and life are synonymous terms. One is the source of the other. Electricity cannot exist lest life exists prior to it. This life does not consume the body as the fire does not consume the bush, though it permeates it. This brings us to a clear understanding of the power of man over all forces, when he knows that he is life itself, unfettered and free. Life cannot be injured by anything external to itself, and tell me, what is external to life that is greater than life? Many of you, no doubt, have heard of men walking through fire without being burnt. What the subjective mind receives and holds fixed without doubt is reflected outwardly. This is an immutable law. In India and Tibet, I have seen the oracles, in a state of self-hypnosis, perform feats which puzzle the ordinary man. Feats such as twisting white-hot metal by bare hands and the bending and twisting of steel that cannot in the ordinary way be bent, even the slightest fraction, by the strongest human hands. The subjective activity in the individual expresses itself externally. This is proved scientifically by trance and hypnosis. But when you are consciously aware of this law of the subjective self, and become aware of its action, you can virtually do anything according to your own conception of what you can do. It is a simple law inherent in your being, And when thoroughly understood, there is no need to apply it by trance or hypnosis. You just become aware. The conditions that you believe are existent in yourself are given power to manifest in your mind and body, because you believe them to be true. But the only power they have is the power you give them, and this produces either positive or negative conditions according to the image you hold. But life is. It does not have to be created. It is the source of all things, as well as the power behind our thinking. The subjective self often has power over the objective self, because the subjective self is the first to be affected substantially. When this law is not understood, you are a slave to your subjective mind. But when understood, you are a master of yourself and fulfill the law of your being as given in chapter 1 of Genesis. Then said God, "Let us make man in our own likeness to resemble us, with mastery over everything." So God formed man in his own image and likeness. In the likeness of God he formed him, with power to create by the same means. Thus we are like unto God, having dominion over all things. Jesus said, "All power has been given unto me in heaven and on earth." Moses got instructions to go to the children of Israel. God said unto Moses, "I am that I am, and thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. You must tell the Israelites that the Eternal, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob has sent you. This is my name for all time. This is my title for all ages. This is the announcement of being in the Absolute, in that first originating plane of pure spirit, where the material does not yet exist, and therefore there cannot be any extension in space, and consequently no sequence in time, showing that the only possible mode of being is the consciousness of self-existence, awareness without limitation of either time or space, the realization of the universal here and the everlasting now, the concentration of the all into point and expansion of point into all. There is but one being, and that is God eternal. This is the announcement of being in the Absolute, pure spirit, I am. I am the cause behind all things. I am everywhere. There is nowhere where I am not. I am not limited, undifferentiated, or differentiated. I am the perfect freedom of life. This is the foundation of our own spiritual being, as well as that of our physical existence. It was this that Jesus saw so clearly and expounded so simply in the statement, I and the Father are one. You can limit yourself by your own conception of yourself, but you cannot limit consciousness, mind, or thought. They are beyond limitation, free, unfettered, and do not exist in time and space. Thought is the product of consciousness and mind is the vehicle of expression, yet consciousness is supreme. Awareness is the best available word we have to explain unconsciousness. Consciousness must become aware of itself. We then become aware of the all, concentrated into point in ourselves, and the point developing into all. All has no boundary, and point is everywhere. The point begins to expand into the all when we become aware of the all. Point is concentrated into individuality. Individuality then expands into the all. Similarly, man's consciousness becomes the consciousness of God to the individual. There is one Lord, and the Lord then is within you. This is the great secret hidden in the allegory of the Bible. But although this was a new announcement to the Hebrew people, it was not new to Moses, for in Acts 7, we are told that Moses was educated in the culture of the Egyptians. He was a strong man in speech and action. He must therefore have been initiated into the deeper secrets of the deepest mysteries. It is said that Moses has learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Therefore, he must have been familiar in his early life with the words, I am that I am. We know that Moses was brought up as the son of Pharaoh's daughter, and the secret instruction had been confined to those who had been initiated into the great mysteries of Osiris. So if Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, he must have been initiated into the great mysteries of Osiris. In whatever way we may interpret the story of Moses meeting with the divine at the burning bush, one thing is plain. It indicates the point in his career when it became known to him that the only way of liberation for mankind was through the recognition of the oneness of all, the one being all, and all being are the one, and the one only. So we are brought back to the statement of our being the image and likeness of God. This truth is carried down through the ages, and though buried and covered with dogma and creed, it still cannot be lost or completely hidden, and will rise again to its proper place in the lives of the people, to lead them into the perfect liberty of life. The time is coming when it will be absolutely plain. It will not be long before people all over the world are crying aloud for this great truth, and it will then be again heralded, as it was in the deliverance of the Israelites out of Egypt. So it will be the same power that will deliver the people of God out of their self-imposed misery and slavery. At the moment, people are not ready for this great truth. They would still cast it aside with those who tried to reveal it. It is only through great suffering and sorrow that they turn their faces to the Almighty for His aid. There are many teaching in the world, but they are all inferior to the teachings of Moses and Jesus, which is the final, the one and only truth. Your creative process of thought is the same with that of the Infinite, who created man in a spiritual state, and He now holds them just as He created them, in His own image and likeness. This recognition must come from the individual to make it a reality in his own life. From point, all begins and extends outwards. Therefore, it must also be the same in the individual. That point through which the Infinite expresses the individual is the point through which the individual expresses the Infinite. This then becomes the property of the race, but it must necessarily begin with the individual. Just as the leaven in the bread is expressed through the whole bread, so it is with the individual and the race. In the days of ancient Egypt, the people had to be educated up to this great truth, and they have not yet advanced very far in this education. Moses' eyes were open to see these truths as the power to expand throughout humanity and liberate the world. He realized that his mission was to set man free by educating them gradually to the true knowledge of the divine name, so that they might gain a true understanding of the law of their own being. Moses saw in the understanding of this truth the liberating of humanity from all limitation, misery, disease, and want. Also, Moses foresaw, through the ignorance of the people of this time, the possibility of the complete destruction of civilization and the loss of the great truth. It was to prevent this that he conceived and inaugurated the great scheme known as the Mosaic Law. The Master Jesus came to fulfill and complete the work that Moses began. The one showed God as a universal spirit, and the other showed this universal spirit individualized in humanity. Moses and Jesus are, therefore, linked together as the two great prophets who came to show man the way to his own freedom and salvation. The emancipation of the race can be obtained only by the understanding and application of the law of being of the individual. When this can be developed in the race, mankind will then free itself from its own self-imposed misery and illusion. Modern research has shown us that this great fundamental truth was not confined to Egypt, but formed the ultimate center of all religions of antiquity. It was the secret in which the supreme initiation of all the highest mysteries culminated. It could not be otherwise, for it was the only ultimate conclusion to which generations of clear-headed thinking people could come. But these were sages, philosophers, men of wisdom and knowledge, and this final conclusion was beyond the masses. Then came creeds and dogmas, which added further confusion to the ignorant masses. Dogmas and creeds were used, in the first place, to hold man in subjection. But this was an entire misunderstanding of the law. The idea of controlling the individual by some creed or dogma is one of the most hideous and perverted actions of the ecclesiastics. So we see the blind leading the blind, and they all fall into the ditch. The same is happening today. In fact, they are very much in the ditch, now buried in the ditch, and it will take some little time to dig them out. People are liable to clutter their minds with unessentials, including spiritual phenomena. They become so engrossed in phenomena, in astral shadows, that they seek nothing else. This, though an aid in the first place, becomes a hindrance if one becomes attached to it. It is necessary to hold yourself completely separate and unfettered from phenomena. Otherwise, the truth gets dimmer and dimmer. I think I've seen all the phenomena this world can produce in India, in America, and in Tibet, in the hidden retreats in the faraway Himalayas. It is good if it gives you an understanding, but the deeper you become engrossed in it, the more liable you are to get enmeshed and overpowered by it, and to lose yourself. Therefore, it is necessary to isolate yourself from it and see it for what it is, just phenomena. Phenomena may be true, and it may not be true, according to your interpretation of it. But there is something greater beyond. The truth of your own being is much greater, and it is more profitable for you to realize it than to delve into phenomena. The Master knew about the spiritual realms and all that takes place in these realms, but his great truth was that of his oneness with the Father, the revealing of the divine spirit in man. The truth is lost in the midst of meaningless words and confuse even the learned in our midst. The learned confuse themselves and others by the spinning of words. Today it is only the sages and deep thinkers of a high standard who can pierce the veil into these great truths. Yet truth is simplicity, and only the unfolded mind can grasp it, while the learned are mystified in a maze of conception. We find in the lower orders of priests throughout the world today very little knowledge of the inner mysteries, but immense knowledge of ritual and formula which they practice continually without having any idea of what they are about. So they go on mystifying the people and confusing themselves. The truth is so palpably clear to anyone who inquires deeply enough. It is that deep, deep insight and feeling within man that enables him to seek and find the root of his own being. Those with deep insight in the law of being feel deeply grieved at the great catastrophe facing the human race. Worshipping images and idols, they do not know what they are worshipping, thus heading for disaster or the greatest magnitude. Our so-called Christianity has not saved the world from disaster. We find people of the Christian faith praying to God for the destructions of others of the same faith, while the others do the same thing. We also see those of different faith continually warring against each other. What a calamity with leaders who are blind to the truth, leading others who are blind into destruction. Jesus said plainly, "You are worshiping something you do not know, but we are worshiping something we do know. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship him in spirit and in reality." Hence, throughout the ages, we find an inner religion of the supreme mystery for the initiated few, and an outer religion for the most part idolatrous, for the purpose of creating a religious dogma or creed, thereby holding the people in subjection through religion. So all through the ages, and even in our present day, the people were not left without a religion, but were given a religion which was thought suitable to their gross apprehension of things. This was left in the hands of the lower order of priests, who themselves were little, if at all, better instructed than the worshippers. The great mystery of the ancient Egyptian temple was enthroned in the midst of a magnificent edifice. In the inner veiled sanctuary, behind a great golden curtain, when the other golden curtains were drawn, there was revealed no great Apollo or god, as you might expect, but a common onion. Why should the most common thing on earth be so enthroned? Tons of them lay in the streets to be sold. The masses could not perceive the meaning, but he who penetrated the real meaning was initiated in the mysteries of Osiris, and therefore his lips were sealed. The veil was lifted. He understood that it represented the all-presence of the eternal living one spirit of worship, to be found not only in the temples, but in the streets, in the fields, and all places alike. The onion also received the symbol of the outer and inner covering, until in the very center the one is reached. Only 1 in 100,000 penetrated the mystery, and he was immediately admitted into the inner mysteries of Osiris. To the unenlightened mind, a god, some wonderful statue or a great pearl, would have been more appropriate, so for the masses a superficial explanation was palmed off. Thus the beginning of creeds and dogmas came into being, and the real meaning became submerged, as it is today, in sanctimonious formalities. Yet the same truth of the omnipresence of the eternal living Spirit has been passed down through the ages. Therefore, worship God everywhere, in your garden, in the flowers and the vegetables, in the fields, in your home, in your friends, everywhere. And in the very center of our being we are, pure spirit eternal. You are humble when you know the truth. It is beyond the understanding of most, but all who desire the impersonal power must become as humble as the impersonal power itself, which expresses itself even through the humblest creation. Unless ye become as a little child, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. The Master felt this humbleness of spirit. He who is puffed up cannot know God, because he knows only his outside personal self. Your humbleness is not a negative attitude, but a positive attitude towards life. Thus you become attractive. Birds, animals, people seek you, because the power is seeking itself, finding itself in you. When the deepest thing in you finds itself in something else, it flows to it and seeks to unite with it. Blessed are those who feel poor in spirit. The realm of heaven is theirs. This is a true saying, for it is the humble alone who know God. He that vaunteth himself knoweth not the inner realization of the truth, for his vanity is proof of his ignorance. So this is the truth that was given to all who understood, but it was hidden from the masses. Even the lower order of priests were prevented from knowing this inner mystery in case they might reveal it to the masses. Thus the masses were kept in subjection and ignorance. Even today theologians are unaware of the real truth. Our theological colleges are little more than word-spinning factories, and when the priest finishes his training, he knows very little more than he did before he entered, except that he has learned a great deal of ritual and formalities. A few pertinent questions will prove my statement. The answers you will receive will be evasive and vague, and you will very soon find out that he has not yet found the secret. In fact, he will probably tell you that you should not delve into these things. It is not for you to question. What has man been given reasoning power for? The Master said, Seek, and ye shall find. Ask, and ye shall receive. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. But in this case you will seek, and you will not find. You will ask, and you will not receive. You will knock, and it cannot be opened unto you, because he does not know the truth himself. The truth will eventually be revealed to mankind, and the scales will fall from man's eyes, and he will see how he has been deceived generation after generation. The only sin is ignorance of the truth. We perpetuate our ignorance. Therefore, we are born in sin. In St. John, chapter 4, 21 through 24, Jesus said, The time is coming when you will be worshiping the Father, neither on this mountain nor at Jerusalem. You are worshiping something you do not know, but we are worshiping what we do know. But the time is coming. It has come already when the real worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in reality. For these are the worshippers that the Father desires. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship him in spirit and in reality. When any nation or leaders of the people ridicule the truth of their own being as revealed in the Bible, thereby setting in operation campaigns of hate, which only revert upon themselves, creating suffering in both soul and body, then these nations and people shall surely bring upon themselves catastrophe. If you hate, you bring hate upon yourself. You have a right to defend yourself, but let love dominate your action. By all means, avoid hate or revenge. One must learn to love even one's enemies. If we create error in ourselves, it will externalize itself by the God-given power of our own being, but it has no power except the power we give it. Therefore, hold fast to that which is good, so that it will manifest in your life. The divine power, the wisdom and intelligence of the infinite, is always flowing through channels prepared by itself. These channels are always a little way ahead of the race, beyond and above the rest, and lead the race to higher states in its own self-evolution. Thus the race is led along the path. The path may be wide in places, but it converges into the narrows, and there we find the depth. The infinite chooses the channels for his own self-expression, for he is moving forward the whole race from within man himself. Those who are out in front become as lights in the path of man. I am the light. He that follows me shall never know darkness. If you follow in my footsteps, you shall never see darkness. I am the life. The people of God will be brought together. Only a small company is necessary to leaven the many. There will be the spearhead of the infinite power that will emancipate mankind. This generation shall not pass away till these things have come to pass, the Master said, and he meant this generation, in which all these things are taking place now. What better work can one do than assist in this great work? The only real and important work is in revealing the life as one life in all. As it was in the beginning, is now, and the same forever. It is feeling that counts in this work, not so much the intellect, for scroll after scroll weigh down our weary shelves. The only point of ignorance is centered in ourselves. How many shelves are weighed down by piles of intellectual nonsense? Learn to discern the false, the ever-fleeting from the everlasting. Learn above all to separate head learning from soul wisdom, the eye from the heart doctrine. Even ignorance is better than head learning with no soul wisdom to guide it. The doctrine of the eye is for the crowd. The doctrine of the heart is for the elect. How many people today read book after book and are not one bit further on? In fact, they are worse off because they have cluttered their minds with so many different ideas that they are completely confused. Do not lose the power of your own thinking. This is the most important thing in life. Why let others do your thinking for you when thinking for yourself is the greatest asset you have? Most people are imitators. They cannot think for themselves. They are controlled by the actions and ideas of others. Do your own thinking. Herein lies your safety lie. This book, while in the process of teaching you the truth, will help you to think deeply. Every sentence is concentrated, truth matter that requires deep contemplation. The study of the Master's course with these lessons will help you to grasp the full import of the truth. The negative conditions in your life will disappear immediately you follow the divine life to take its place, for negation has no power of its own. Keep the mind in a positive attitude at all times by the awareness of the law of your being. So the law of progression will manifest in the self and the race. When any nation or individual ridicules all that it has hitherto held sacred, because it has never learned the eternal truth itself, and has placed its faith in forms, ceremonies, and traditions, then woe to that nation or individual, for by the inevitable law of nature, in the plane of the mind, it will bring upon itself catastrophe. It is the immutable law of cause and effect. I have repeatedly told you that this is one law, not two laws. Effect is but the cause manifesting. So we see, cause and effect are one. Cause is thought-action, which manifests from the mind into the vehicle of matter and creates the effect. The beginning and the end are in the beginning. Immediately you remove the cause, the effect will disappear. Thus we know how to deal with negative objective conditions in our lives. As in the stream which is flowing into the sea, when the source is dried up, only the remaining residue in the channel is left to flow into the sea. So the residue of effect in your being will pass away after the cause is removed. Since it has no power of its own, it will fade away into nothingness where it belongs. Egypt was old when Moses was young, and signs of decadence was evident. Cruel oppression, pomp, and vanity, these self-disintegrating forces were at work. Soon mighty Egypt would be as dust, smitten by its own rottenness. This was Egypt that had led the van of civilization. What was to be expected from the rest of the world? What was the outlook into the future, with an intellectual development expanding only on the material side, without any knowledge of the spiritual truth in which was the real livingness of life? Nothing but the ultimate destruction of mankind in deadly strife, increased by the outward polish of the materialized intellectual greed and selfishness, which feeds the beast in man. Are we repeating the same cycle of events of ancient Egypt? As Egypt was decadent then, so is our world today, smitten with its own rottenness. God forbid that we should fall into the complete error of ancient Egypt. We must wake up before it is too late. Without the truth, civilization is bound to decay, and it was necessary then, as it is now, to adhere to the truth. Woe unto the nation that is left without the truth. By the law of its own inherent being, it would destroy itself and pass into oblivion. As in ancient Egypt, there was a great intellectual development on the material side. So we see the same today. Polished, materialized, intellectual greed is the canker in our midst. Yet how few even stop to think what misery it creates. They laud it and put it on a pedestal. Success today means material gain. But this will lead to its own self-destruction. The false god will be utterly destroyed. To the unenlightened, it is the most powerful thing in the world today, yet is the most destructive to the human soul. One time, the international money changers sat at the steps of the temple. Now they sit in massive buildings. A rope with knots was used 20,000 years ago. What do you think should be used now? We are forced to use a system based on usury, which is directly opposed to the law of God. A system that has made men slaves to a debt in perpetuity, a burden illegally and falsely imposed upon them, and one of the fundamental causes of war, internal strife, and misery. What is to become of this world if the real truth should become extinct, but the infinite has planned otherwise? When man suffers enough from his own waywardness and ignorance, at the end there is no other way out but to seek the eternal. Human beings must change to suit the law, because the law does not change to suit human beings. Remember the story of the prodigal son. The truth must no longer be a mysterious legend of the inner temple, but must become the household word in every family. This is the work of this generation, and it is far from being accomplished yet. The only way to accomplish it is to make the supreme mystery of life the starting point of a child's education, instead of it being reserved as a last and final teaching before he dies. In schools we clutter and cram the mind of children with much useless rubbish, which he will never use. Children are forced to accept facts having no foundation in truth, and the child becomes a sponge, an automaton, and is no longer able to think except in terms of what it has been forced upon it. Proper culture would teach the truth of being and the culture of the mind. The mind would be trained to think on the plane of higher ideals, which would bring wisdom and understanding, and put kindness and happiness in their natural place. As polished materialism disappears from the face of the earth, so will the system of education that feeds it disappear also. Culture is a sure foundation for the life of the people, not a narrow, socialized, bigoted culture, but an expansive culture that grows to include all nations and all people. Not confined and limited to any group of people or society, truth is not found between the covers of any book, but in the heart of enlightened man himself. Truth is freedom, expansion, completeness. Fearless understanding and love will give you complete understanding between man and man, nation and nation, people and people. Go, find the truth everywhere, in the garden, the fields, see it in every man's eyes and every living thing. I deny you nothing, neither dogma nor creed do I deny you. But I say, do not flounder in them, nor in philosophies either, for they are but a means to an end, not the end itself. We must train the people to think, and not do their thinking for them. Man must become his own emancipator. He has long enough been cajoled and deceived by unscrupulous leaders. Are we not today fed on propaganda? We swallow these mental pills, digest them, become automatons, repeating the rote, and bringing destruction upon ourselves by our own inherent power. Man will not think for himself. He allows commerce, trade, and intellectual greed to control him, and he becomes irresponsible. On the one hand, he gives up his authority. He loses his individuality. He allows others to do his thinking for him spiritually. And on the other hand, he becomes like a wild beast fighting for his welfare and existence. The new order itself is becoming just as much lip service. As long as the people are held in subjection, that nation will denigrate. And if allowed and helped to think by leaders who understand the truth, that nation will become the nation to lead the whole earth to the truth. They will be the people of God, having no nation, yet a nation unto nations. As Moses gathered the tribes together in the wilderness, so now, throughout a number of nations, are the people of God set apart to lead all nations into the truth. The mission to Israel by Moses opened with the declaration of, I am, as the all-embracing one. And this was the sacred name of God given to Moses, I am, and there can be no other. The only possible statement of the divine is that of the present subjective universal being, I, and the ever-present am. Then I am is the name of God. So the first commandment is the announcement of the divine being as the infinite one, the universal I, the ever-present am. I am that I am. Every time you say I am, you mention the name of God, and this is a sacred word. Then your name is God, but you do not know it. How many times a day do you say it? How often do you realize its meaning? When one reflects within oneself, the only power is a subjective I, and this is a starting point within man. M confirms a report and says, yes, I am. Repeat the name of God to yourself often enough, and you will find this tremendous power becoming a reality. The name one time will come when you will feel this great reality. It is beyond human description. It is our future growth to all eternity. That is why both Moses and Jesus assigned it to its supreme place. Jesus and Moses are the two great figures in the Bible, and their teachings are identical in nature. Moses proclaims the eternal I am, and Jesus proclaims the personal identity of the great I am, and each appeals to the other. Moses said, O my brethren, shall the Lord raise up a prophet like unto me? That was, that the prophet that was to come would duplicate Moses. And when Jesus came, he said, If they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither would they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead. I have not come to destroy the law of Moses, but to fulfill the law of the prophets. We understand Moses when we understand Jesus. We see the whole scheme operating through the ancients, the intelligence choosing its own channel for self-expression. But to grasp the full meaning, we will find the key to their utterances in our own hearts and on our own lips in the word I am. As I have already stated, and this must go deep within us to the divine universal law of living, which is written within us, and of which Moses and Jesus were the greatest exponents. The mission of Moses was to build up a nationality that would be dependent on both time and country, and which should derive its solidarity from its recognition of the principle of the one. Its national being must be based upon its expanding realization of the great central truth, and upon the guarding and developing of that truth, and for this nation must be consecrated. It was in the children of the desert, the children of Israel, that Moses found ready to hand the material which he needed. For these ancient wanderers brought with them a simple belief in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And although they had been 400 years in Egypt, this belief had not been completely extinguished. Here Moses formed the nucleus for his nation, into whose hands this great truth was to be entrusted, the Israelites. And so he led forth this people on the great symbolic march through the wilderness. The story is told in Exodus. Now what is the wilderness symbolically? It is a symbol of a barren place where no growth could be obtained. He led them into a land that flowed with milk and honey. Milk and honey are symbolical of spiritual food, a land filled with the bounties of God. This can only come about by the realization of the divine spirit in man. The people whom he would lead were the people of God, and since God is, I am. This was the true name of that nation, which was to be built upon the eternal truth of the one life. Now the name Israel represents the trinity of mankind in 3 syllables, and carried a great meaning. The first is, pronounced as if you were drawing a breath, signifying the life principle in action, and more particularly the individual life, the mother. The recognition of the individualization of the life principle formed the basis of the Assyrian worship. The syllable is, also rendered as ish and ash, give rise to the worship under the plural name Ashur, and later formed that of the Egyptian goddess Isis. A detailed record of these ancient religions is held intact in the great Shakya monastery in Tibet. Is represents a feminine spiritual principle manifesting in humanity. Call it soul. The second syllable Ra is the name of the Egyptian sun god, and this represents the physical life, or the life principle as represented in the body, the material. And the third, El, E-L, represents the universal king. It is that is, the nameless one which includes in itself both male and female, and gives rise to them. Another use of the word is Al, A-L, Ale, A-L-E, or Allah, A-L-A, High, or Allah, A-L-L-A-H, which is designated the Supreme Being, pure Spirit, as it is now the same as before it had individualized itself in the many. Man, to attain liberty, must realize his 3 modes of being, the spiritual, the psychic, and the physical, or as the Bible expresses it, spirit, soul, and body. He must know that these 3 are in himself, and must recognize the source from which they spring. Therefore man is instructed into the kingdom of heaven, which combines a 3-fold recognition of himself and of God, which is accurately represented by the combination of the 3 syllables, is, Ra, El. And unless these are joined in one single unity, Israel, the recognition is not complete. It is here where most cults fail. Many are based on mind alone and are not complete, yet gather many followers, eventually becoming even more dogmatic than some orthodox religions. Is, by itself, realizes only the psychic world and results in sorcery and mental images. Ra, by itself, results in materialism. El, by itself, corresponds only to the same ever-ruling power not understood by man, and this results in idolatry. Jesus said to the woman at the well, "You are worshiping something you do not know. We are worshiping what we do know." This is what is just happening today. Most people are worshiping what they do not know. Israel, awake. The Lord thy God is one Lord. Is, I-S, represents the breath, the soul. God breathed into man the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Ra, R-A, represents the sun, the material body. El, E-L, represents the infinite spirit in man. So Israel represents mankind, and when you know the truth about the spoken word, you know that I am is the name of God. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. I am is the Word. I is always the power of the subjective self. When you know the truth about the sacred word, I am, immediately you know the truth. It leads you through eternity. It is your future growth to infinity. The history of this people is dignified by a succession of prophets that no other nation can claim. Yet Moses looked down the centuries, pointing only to one prophet like unto himself. But we miss these most important parts of the Scripture on which the fuller understanding so greatly depends. Just as we miss the point when we are told that man is made in the image and likeness of God, so we miss the point when we are told that this other prophet, Jesus, is a prophet like unto Moses. Therefore Jesus is the great prophet sent unto the people of God, who are as leaven to the race, or as yeast to the bread. Now we know what yeast does, so must the people of God do to the race, for this is the purpose of Israel. I am not going into the details of all the tribes of Israel, would not at the moment suit our purposes. Although there are many prophets between Moses and Jesus, Jesus is the only one like unto Moses. But Jesus said, Before Abraham I am. Now this is significant in itself. Jesus then is the prophet who will reestablish the people of the I am. And these teachings are the forerunner of the great manifestation, the great prophet himself, the manifestation where it is said he will appear in the cloud. Now there is nothing to prevent this happening, for those who understand the law of the heavens are well aware that the earth is but the footstool of the Almighty. So we see how the whole scheme behind humanity originates in the divine intelligence, which chooses its own channel for self-expression. I and the Father are one. If you believe me, you shall never see death. I am the life. These words are old, yet they are ever new. When you know the truth of your own being, there is no going back. There is but a going on to complete unfoldment. And as Jesus said, you are the light of the world. A town on top of a hill cannot be hidden, nor do men light a lamp to put it under a bowl. They put it on a stand, and it shines for all in the house. So your light is to shine before men, that they may see the good you do and glorify your Father in heaven. Awareness of the truth, your oneness with life, lighteth the light that shineth in your own temple. Then let your shine before all men. End of part 3.